has found you at last. My protege, my friend. Our calculations were correct. The ephemeral equation is unbalanced. The Earth spins on a strange and terrifying new axis. And everywhere, unbridled consequence. The world is a wasteland of failures past, and yet, you must ride out into it, unafraid. Take this. It is hope, the very last of it. It is yours now. You were bold once. Be bold once more. Free yourself from this suffocating stillness. Fix your gaze on the horizon. And face the fearsome truth of the darkest dungeon. Your confession is complete. The cosmic axes are aligned once more. Forgive yourself. Humanity is a weak hypothesis, after all. An unbalanced equation, an imperfect angle. We sow the seeds of our ruin and seek to deny its reckoning. We make mountains of our mistakes, monsters of our misdeeds. We slip and stumble, we fail and we falter. And yet, in each of us, a hopeful light. Holding fast against the hellish shadows that gather between our good intentions. And in each of us, a limitless emptiness. Of a darkest dungeon. Your confession is complete. The crown is sundered. The cosmic axes are aligned once more. Forgive yourself. Humanity is a weak hypothesis, after all. An unbalanced equation, an imperfect angle. We sow the seeds of our ruin and seek to deny its reckoning. We make mountains of our mistakes, monsters of our misdeeds. We slip and stumble, we fail and we falter. And yet, in each of us, a hopeful light, holding fast against the hellish shadows that gather between our good intentions. And in each of us, the limitless emptiness of a darkest dungeon. You must remember the world as it was, if you hope to save it. It was not a perfect world, but it was ours, and we must fight to restore it. Perhaps the world was a dream. Even so, it is surely worth remembering. It is your charge to manifest a vision of the sane Earth. Little by little, your recollection mends the rifts of this sundered plane. When all is lost, we cling to what we can remember. A fleeting impression, a flickering light. Bask for a moment in the light of distant days. A memory of pleasure can dull a moment of pain. Teeming markets, bustling streets, we delighted in the city's vitality. We would often take our afternoon tea at the quaint cafe a few blocks from the library. I recall evenings spent sipping wine in the square, marveling at the architecture I was sure would outlast us both. A welcome reprieve from the rigors of academia, The salted air and steady surf lulled us into a deep, restorative sleep. Along the lively docks, cheerful fishmongers offered a limitless array of marine delicacies at a pittance. We stood on the shore, gulls wheeling overhead, the horizon brimming with infinite possibilities. Though infrequent, our pastoral retreats were always welcomed by the hardy folk of the fields. Reticent at first, the farmers grew to appreciate our interest in their lifestyle and their lands. The croppers' folklore was as rich as their soil, and we delighted in their ancient tales and esoteric rumors. Sun-dappled roads winding through ancient forests, our murmured conversations in the coach. We were close then. Ancient bridges, crumbling old walls. You knew the history of each, and I delighted in your stories. When the coach slowed at last, I demurred at how the voyage is often more transformational than the arrival. You have exhausted your supply, for now. Each flicker has found gainful purpose. Seek more. Assign no anguish to an empty purse. Experience, well earned and well spent. A little more light, a little more strength. The true splendor of a world, those who live within it. Permutations of an idea, iterations of a soul. Variety, superfluous for some, a necessity for others. Tools and trappings, the regalia of a life. Let them be properly attired for the apocalypse. Once more into the maelstrom, in search of what hope yet remains. Sanctuary, as fleeting as a dying star. The road calls once more to its dark passenger. Hope springs in the unlikeliest places. Search every shadow. There is a little light here. He is the perfect weapon, a sharpened edge without pity or remorse. In the world's dark corners, he will revel in his rotting immortality. She will seek out what was lost to the shadows and restore it where it is needed most. She will unite the remnants of her people and rid the wild steppes of what roaming horrors yet remain. A watchful protector, he will safeguard the roads he once haunted. Wherever people gather, his songs will soothe the destitute and galvanize the fearful. Wherever the weak and vulnerable bow beneath the cruel yoke, he will be there to repay their oppression in kind. Humility fortifies the hand and the heart. Behind his unwavering shield, the peasant militia will rally. Warden and Watcher, master of the outer spheres, he will be a cosmic bulwark against intrusions from the void. The world's wounded have much to teach. She will study them and work tirelessly to treat their trauma. She will teach others to survive in scarcity, and through her, abundance will bloom from lifeless debris. A beacon in the dark, Her radiant faith will affirm the humanity in us all. It is done. Your labors have borne fruit. Imperfect, surely, but whole once more. Wholesome accomplishment is good for the soul. Reflect now on simpler times, precious moments and finer things. As the mind wanders, the past feels almost within reach. Wisdom will help you choose a path. Resourcefulness will ensure you survive it. Study the winding roads and routes of our kingdom. Find any advantage. Look to those who have known fear and failure in ample portion. Hearts and minds will carry the day. These are beaten, broken souls, and yet our fortunes ride with them. To recall a thing is to make it real once more. Spare a thought for tools of iron. Such implements will serve us well. The more they have to hold on to, the harder they will fight. Memory is the hearth that warms the mind. New instruments will help us diagnose the world's affliction and overcome it. A drop of sanity in a sea of madness. A welcome advancement in the science of survival. Every twinkling recollection is another implement at our disposal. Your boldness will not go unrewarded. Your determination does you credit. Do not retreat from painful remembrance. Embrace and learn. A little company for the long ride ahead. It cannot fight, but perhaps it can calm. These wheels are invested with noble purpose. Every rotation, blessed rest for the warriors of our cause. There is no shame in celebrating your gains. The struggle enriches your spirit. Hail the vessel of your deliverance. She searches the dying world for the keys to her own salvation. Once she had a sliver of decency, now only greed. The antiquarian wants what we have, and she will not be denied. We tread beyond the realms of reason. The walker from beyond the stars, a shambling horror. A star-spawned child of the infinite void. Each covets what the other has, and plots to take it. Cruelty and callousness have claimed dominion here. There is nothing between them now. Nothing at all. Resentment, the slowest and deadliest poison of them all. Narrowed eyes, muttered threats. All trust is lost. Restless souls thrive in chaos they create. Animus grows in proportion to mounting pressure. Suffering strengthens the bond. While the heart still beats, desire will never die. Aspiration unites the hopeful. Two facets of the same stone, never one without the other. tried and tested, a bond to be counted on. At last, the thing is finally passed on. Let us take a closer look at the thing, as repulsive as it is. Analysis is the natural prelude to action. What can we learn upon closer inspection? Observe the subject carefully, and you will discover its weaknesses. This one is inches from death. Is there nothing you can do? There is beauty in our imperfections. All heroes are human. The mind cannot hope to withstand such a protracted assault. Empowered, emboldened. Cooperation is the key. In crisis, we can rely only upon each other. This wound, at least, has been tended to. Welcome relief from caustic agony. Extinguished at last. The pulse slows. Sanity returns. A little help impeccably timed. This road cannot be walked alone. A small foundation of trust. Relief comes rarely in these times. Savor it. There is comfort in company. A small reprieve from this carousel of horrors. Lenity, grace, small acts that drive back the darkness. Compassion quiets the howling mind. The twisted faces of the damned, piled high and cloaked in malice. The baleful king seeks a new trophy. There is madness beneath its pallid cloak. Avert your eyes. An interminable conflict. Fight through the fatigue. Sweat-soaked brows, unsteady stances. Exhaustion takes hold. The Leviathan's breath thickens the air. Denied once more, she retreats to some unknowable place. What man is he who defies death by sheer force of will? The undying flagellant escapes the scythe afresh. Death has come to claim her elusive prize. Death is manifest and will suffer no abnegation. The Pale Rider has tracked her quarry. Cowardice, a crude term for the science of self-preservation. Recalculating one's odds is never a wasted endeavor. Recognize your disadvantage and accept it. When myriad variables align themselves against you, it is wise to desist. Loathing made manifest. Push this half-made horror back into the void. A parody of human outline. It must be destroyed. Steady yourself. Hold fast, for who knows what lurks in the beyond. And now, the greatest test of all. Darkness encroaches, inexorable. Perhaps they have given their last.
once again teetering on that terrible precipice. Let us hope they find peace.
A long road and an abrupt end. Sadly, some casualties are to be expected. Sacrifice bestows an uncertain absolution. Another wound, another loss. The sum total of violent equation, unfavorably rounded down.
An unforeseen complication. The slow suffering begins.
The fiend's strength dwindles. The enemy weakens and wanes. Malaise, measured and steady. Incremental, but deadly all the same. Measure out your violence and apply it judiciously. Agony by accumulation.
This is no time to falter. Anxiety foments insidious fears.
The mind's grasp grows tenuous. Trammeled, trapped, held captive by fear. Awash in turmoil. What is it, then, that gazes back so intently from the abyss?
Stumbling and stupefied.
Bafflement and vexation.
A setback, nothing more.
The siren song of the void, spurned for now. Through adversity and affliction, the heart beats still. Another blow on the bruise. A breakthrough. Excellent work. A brilliant conclusion. Lethality writ large. Stupendous. Bravo. A master stroke. Well done.
Weaken them, that another may finish the work.
Any being, however horrid, can be brought to heel. Cunning, you may outwit them yet. Victory supposes strategy. Press on.
Dragged back from the brink.
Fellowship forged through toil. The path of exculpation need not be a lonely one. Solidarity may yet arrest this collapse.
Self-reliance is a rare and wonderful thing.
There remains a foothold out of this mire. Now climb. A slow dissection. An unavoidable end.
All problems have their solutions, even the big ones.
The unrelenting application of violence yields morbid gains.
A resounding response.
They falter, so press your advance. Take heart and do not relent.
The smallest variable can make all the difference.
A deliberate and methodical appliance of harm. A steady subtraction, an invariable result.
Let us hope to finish this quickly.
A promising development. Early results are encouraging.
On to the next. One less obstacle in our path.
Another impediment, cleared with impunity.
Messy,
But effective. The work continues. A righteous action. A petty hindrance. A simple variable, easily resolved. A lesson taught is a lesson learned. Straightforward and effective.
a trivial worriment.
Easily dispatched. A trifling matter. Elementary. A simple solution. Destroy this half-remembered specter. Spiritual torment has no place in the compassionate mind. It must be purged. The past is gone. This thing is merely an echo. Emancipation is at hand. Unmake this illusion.
A miscalculation, perhaps.
Mistimed. Misdirected. Haste and carelessness. Hallmarks of the unprepared. An opportunity. Squandered. Fight on. There is no way out or through. What matters most is we reach the mountain. Alive, if possible. We will see them again. I am sure of it. In life or in death, we are all prisoners here. For every miscalculation, a consequence. The blood of the valorous and cowardly alike soaks this tainted soil. Cut down these nightmares and blaze the trail to your redemption. The past is gone. Let it die. We are the flame, burning brightly for all the world to see. Though unpleasant in the extreme, this work is noble and necessary. Sweet reprieve until the next test is put before you. Greater threats await those who dare. In this weighty gloom, a spark. The pitiless stamp of cloven hooves can be heard ahead. The hooded watchers howl to their horrid kin. The docks are choked once again with the repellent stench of rotting fish. Let nothing mar your path. Crushed beneath thundering hooves. An unexpected find. Abandoned or forgotten, it is ours now. In crisis, no gain is insignificant. A festering impasse, tended by toothy fiends. They stand guard even now, deathless and dreaming. The lost souls of a dying world, empty of hope and humanity. Stumbling and grasping, shadows of what they once were. Echoes of humanity, twisted by hopelessness. The worst kind of parasite, opportunists. Pillaging brigands, enriching themselves as the world collapses. It is low indeed to profit in destruction. Tread carefully and quickly. This is swine country. Behold, the great cities of man, ruined and aflame. Propriety floats listless on the tide, brined in noxious degradation. The rancid crop grows unchecked and abhorrent. War rewards only resignation. Hidden in warrens and ancient waterways, the swine proliferate unseen and unchecked. There are rumors these rancorous beasts have some demonic spark of otherworldly intelligence. The swine were first reported by denizens of a small hamlet nestled on the eastern coast. Rubble and flame, as far as the eye can see. Unhinged by the impending apocalypse, the fanatics burn book and building alike. Centuries of human learning and achievement, ruined by riotous contempt. The fanatics feed themselves to the fire, their flesh melting like candle wax. Desperate to survive the rising tides, the fisher folk of the coastal provinces resorted to a debased worship of the sea. Primeval, water-worn monoliths were flung up from the ocean floor by some unaccountable tectonic action. They prostrated themselves before the primogenial power of the obelisks, and were rewarded for their supplication. To save themselves, they would slip beneath the brackish waters, and be reborn in the image of their aquatic demiurge. Voracious and decadent, the landowners and peasants alike descended into an orgy of consumption. They emptied their larders, gorging themselves as the world began to crumble. First, they ate the rotten flesh of their animals. Then, still hungry, they turned upon themselves. They thrilled to the succulent flavor that grows up from some nightmare pit far beneath the earth. Resigned to the end of things, they waited for death, and still they wait. Emptied of mind and spirit by some existential shock, the poor devils roam aimlessly amidst the trees. These seasoned soldiers were deployed to a winding front, meant to prevent the cult's descent from the mountain. When the cult came, no orders were shouted, no swords were drawn. There was only stupefying horror, and the catatonic lethargy that follows it. At last, the great ziggurat, temple of failure and regret. The plating is patched. The coach stands ready once more. The roads are rife with peril. A little protection is always welcome. Leave the wretches choking on our dust. Let us hope these repairs will hold. We move once more, albeit unsteadily. The timbers creak, the wheels groan, but we press on nonetheless. The coach's plating is spent. We are exposed. Our protection has been stripped to its last. Wheels askew, coach limping. Be prudent. Mind your wheels. They have nothing left to give. Quickly, repair the damage and be off. They seek to strike while we are vulnerable. Hold them off. You must survive this onslaught short-handed. Work fast, and fight even faster. Safe passage along this stretch. A welcome reprieve.
Let nothing bar your path.
A rare opportunity. Let us advance unimpeded. Ruts in the roadway. There is a barricade ahead. See the debris ahead? That is where they'll make their move. Though decidedly inconvenient, at least we know what's coming. Is your coach prepared for the upcoming obstruction? Brace up. There is danger on this path. The void has rendered reality once more. A psychic onslaught awaits. Despair and disorientation steal your mind as we pass through the void. The road ahead is washed out and strewn with rocks. Mind the wheels. The route will exact a toll on wheel and axle both. Hold fast. Vermin hide by the roadside, waiting in ambush for unwary travelers. Their devices may be crude, but promise atrocity all the same. The unknown awaits. Be wary. We venture blindly forth, at the mercy of the road and its myriad dangers. Travel without proper reconnaissance, a hasty and reckless thing indeed. The tangled trails whisper of torment. Our once familiar kingdom, a stranger to itself. A smoother ride, for a time at least. Repaired and refurbished, ready for the leagues ahead. The time for denial has passed. Onward once again, though all the world's horrors bar the way. The flame, sacred and sputtering, the last hope for us all. Forward now, into the crumbling chaos of the world. When you are ready, this rutted roadway will finally take you home. The road is yours to travel, but you are not alone. The crossroads, where lost souls hope to find their way. The crossroads, a place between places. The crossroads, who will step forward into the light? The crossroads, a beacon for the broken and the battered. The crossroads, wait by the lantern's light and welcome what help may come. I know failure well. I glimpsed it lurking at the ragged edges of your mind. I watched its venom spread through the veins of the world, and I trembled at its terrible reverberations. But I have seen its true nature. Beneath its bluster, deep within the debris of its crushing collapse, there lies a noble road. It calls out, if you are brave enough to believe, that you are not a prisoner of your past,
that the fractured bones of this world can be mended. That a fragile flame, long guttered by sour winds, can blaze radiant once again. The time has come to face your failures, or be consumed by them.
Let us suffer the pitiless whim of chance, then. A random seed, a supplication at the altar of the unknown. Is this fearlessness or indecision? We tempt fate and accept damnation. A simple choice. At least it should be. An elementary problem, is it not? Think carefully. Today's oversight is tomorrow's regret. Myriad options require careful deliberation. The destination is never in question. Only the route you take to get there. When deliberation is exhausted, trust your instincts. Consider all variables, but do it quickly. Your collection can wait. Press onward. Analysis is invaluable until it becomes an excuse for inaction. All that matters is the flickering torch you bear. We must keep moving. Destiny will not be denied. Procrastination of the inevitable is futility itself. Onward while there is still time. Push forward. Lamentably, there is no other choice. The loathing abates. The loathing festers. The loathing whispers. The loathing howls. The loathing spreads. The loathing consumes. The seat of your denial, perched precariously in the murky gloaming. Indistinct and ill-lighted. No comfort awaits you here. The house on the borderlands, half swallowed by the stain. Your sanctum, adrift in this bituminous nightmare. You must face your failures, or be consumed by them. Up ahead, a light in the limitless expanse. Forward now, into oblivion's inky embrace. Push ahead, beyond the reach of this tenebrous malignity. The colliginous cathedral, malign temple of the Iron Crown. Behold, the source of the stain, gateway to incomprehensible emptiness. The nightmare gate is revealed. Beyond, only infernal nihility and non-existence. The mind must be freed of its self-imposed incarceration. The seething sigh, stertorous avatar of ill-concealed rage. Obsession's unshrinking gaze, focused to a fault. Ambition's reach forever exceeds its terrible grasp. The carious gut of the coward, rife with toxic pusillanimity. Its infernal gaze pierces the veil of reality. Behold the hateful god upon his throne, your failures made flesh. Study your decline carefully, that you may fully understand its nature.
At last, the world's mind is free to remember a time before the cancerous corruption.
Your fault was not in burying your furies, but in thinking they would accept such a fate. Obsession blinded you to your blessings and smothered you in a fever dream of dissatisfaction. Ambition drove you to abandon everything you had for everything you wanted. To destroy the thing is to destroy yourself, but the world will spring anew from the memory you kept of it.
You came here seeking solace, but found stagnation instead. This was a beautiful place once. What a pity. The leaves fall, never to grow again. Onward, and let us hope enough yet remains of the world.
The greatest horror, it would seem, is nothing at all. An ocean of emptiness, slowly swallowing the world. While the flame still burns, hope remains. A nebulous nightmare, an apocalypse that only we can oppose. How many souls are lost forever in this lightless obscurity? Stagnant and sprawling, this hellish abyss extends beyond sanity itself. We travel through the incalculable dimensions of human weakness. You have cowered in your crumbling denial long enough. Remain here if you wish. There is always more that can be learned. The flame grows stronger. The Odyssey strengthens you. Knowledge and experience, twin yardsticks of progress. Each milestone makes the next road just a little easier. Do not despair. There is nobility in the attempt. Remain undeterred, and you will yet prevail. Learn from each attempt. Deepen your understanding, and victory will come. Try and try again. You will break through this gloaming murk. On and on, over and over, until the truth is laid bare, and you are finally free. At last, the veil begins to lift. The shadow's advance has been halted. For a time. Success, so long pursued, is rewarded only with creeping revelation. The flame sears the skulking shadows from the darkened corners of the earth. Pity the great denier, chained by its own command. A relentless reach left you empty-handed, clutching for more. Ambition's rewards are dwarfed by its consequences. Cast your cowardice aside, and make right what you have wrought. Your craven past is behind you. Ahead lies redemption.
The shackles of denial must be destroyed.
Morality chokes on the poison fruits of preoccupation. Mania and misery, companions to the last. Left unsurfaced, grievances gain a terrible strength. Let us drag your agglutinated indignities out into the light. I remember our first meeting on the steps of the university. A collegial handshake that would doom us both. Your insightful questions during my lectures gave me pause, and I recognized in you something of a kindred spirit. Despite our differences in age and position, we shared a keen fascination for archaeology, folklore, and of course, occultism. It was you who found the cipher, scribbled hastily in the decaying margins of some long-forgotten tome. Scribbled in blood. Whether by providence or happenstance, we stumbled upon the mark of some strange power invoked the world over, reflected in cultures predating mankind itself. The Iron Crown, enigmatic and ubiquitous. A semicircle, radiating 5 points of power. A symbol hidden deep in the iconography of every ancient empire. Are you shaken? There is so much worse in store. Push on to the inn. Rest and resupply await you. You see, even your valley is not immune to the spreading stain. The bulwark of your denial is giving way. You can feel it. A change in the air. The winds whip more harshly on the far side of the brook. The point of no return welcomes you with open arms. Comforts are exhausted. Ahead, only trial and tribulation. Each gravestone is more than a failure. It is a promise to do better. Echoes of allies reverberating in the void. To attempt and fail is no shameful thing. I remember our first meeting on the steps of the university. A collegial handshake that would doom us both. Your insightful questions during my lectures gave me pause, and I recognized in you something of a kindred spirit. Despite our differences in age and position, we shared a keen fascination for archaeology, folklore, and, of course, occultism. It was you who found the cipher, scribbled hastily in the decaying margins of some long-forgotten tome, scribbled in blood. Whether by providence or happenstance, we stumbled upon the mark of some strange power invoked the world over, reflected in cultures predating mankind itself. A semicircle radiating 5 points of power. A symbol hidden deep in the iconography of every ancient empire. The Iron Crown, enigmatic and ubiquitous. Interminable faculty socials became something of a delight, knowing we'd abscond to a quiet table and lose ourselves in riveting discussion and passionate debate.
commonalities between the mythos of ancient cultures was not a new area of study for either of us. But it was there that we first noticed the pattern. We spent long nights immersed in crumbling, worm-eaten volumes, plumbing the forbidden secrets of antiquity. Between semesters, we would spend our days rambling the woods, talking excitedly of esoteric theory and ancient mysteries. The university's resources were impressive, and yet, on occasion, we relished in first-hand experience. You were my brightest student, my research partner, and my dearest friend. Your vociferous calls to bring our findings before the faculty were dangerously premature. Given the gaps in our understanding, doing so would risk ridicule, or worse, robbery. I took no pleasure in asserting my seniority, stifling your protestations with a strict mandate of absolute secrecy. You acquiesced, but your plaintive susurrations betrayed a burgeoning resentment. We had managed to grasp a thread of connective worship that stretched across vast gulfs of time and tribe, but we did not understand it. We required the highest standard of empirical evidence, lest my career and your future be compromised by the cynicism of our peers. Time and time again I impressed upon you that any adulation afforded us would be fleeting if we could not properly defend our findings. I understood your eagerness to build a reputation, and it pained me greatly to hold you back. You mistook my abundance of caution for a lack of confidence, and would perseverate on your grievances at length. The subsequent months were measured in melted candles and mounting disappointments. The blaze began in the east wing of the great library. Within hours, the entirety of our effort lay in a smoldering, ashen heap. I braced against your rancorous buffeting, avowing a certain hesitant relief at our freedom from that mocking sigil. The uncanny arrival of the letter, however, heralded a new, pernicious phase of our investigation. We set out immediately into the kaleidoscopic wilds of the countryside, and by sundown reached the remote manor whose whereabouts formed the sole contents of that cryptic invitation. At the behest of our charismatic host, we feasted beneath the banner of the Iron Crown, questioned exhaustively by an eager cabal of masked delegates. Our host assured us of the group's anthropological values, but I sensed his designs extended well beyond the theoretical. The house was scattered with ancient rarities and time-worn artifacts, all bearing that damnable emblem that had come to dominate our thoughts. Eyes wild beneath their masks, the assembled devotees shared their terrible theories of timeless, extra-dimensional intelligences, of forces beyond human comprehension. As the night wore on, circles were drawn carefully in chalk, and salt was laid upon the floor. This was not research, it was ritual, and I could not stifle my repulsion. They lit black candles and chanted rhythmically in the guttural tongues of long-forgotten tribes. Even now, I can hear the echoes of those awful invocations. At my insistence, we retired to our room,
where I countered your excitement by clearly outlining the vulnerability of our position. Reason prevailed, and we elected to block the door with a large dresser. We awoke to an empty house. The garroted bodies of the attendees lay around the basement dais, each prostrate along a point of the crown, our host conspicuously absent. I could scarcely countenance such obscenity, but you were transfixed, eyes ablaze with inspiration. The failed ritual would become your obsession. From that pivotal moment, you were blind to all else. Refusing enrollment in the fall, you took up in that moldering brownstone, where I joined you in a vain attempt to assuage your aspirations. Now, free from academic oversight and moral restraint, you vowed to reach into the blackest depths of the occult sciences and be the first to grasp the secret of the Iron Crown. The polarity between us reversed. I became your reluctant assistant in dozens of deplorable experiments, crushed in the grip of your ambition. You calibrated prisms along the points of the crown, cackling in smug satisfaction as wavelengths of hideous and indescribable light burned our eyes. You attempted to map the geometric proportions of the crown to frequencies of sound, and in the resulting silence, our ears welled with blood. At night, I could hear you shuffling about the house, muttering with diabolic intent. The walls of the place closed tight about us, and it seemed at times that the outside world was a dream we could scarcely remember. Desperate to somehow help you regain yourself, I prepared a breakfast and an urgent appeal. My words fell on deaf ears, the food flung to the floor. Your appetites demanded more than I could hope to provide. The crown was a hateful and ravenous thing. It had consumed our careers, our lives, and our friendship. And still, it hungered. Unable to suffer your unprincipled overreach any longer, I made ready to depart, imploring you to rejoin me in more wholesome pursuits. Instead, you babbled of impossible measurements, ushering me down into the bolted cellar. In the dim light, I recoiled at the preparations you had made. 4 bodies laid out along the lateral points of the crown. As the dagger's blade revealed itself through my chest, I understood. I was to be the 5th. A precise arrangement. The sacrifice of conscience. The abandonment of self. The Iron Crown had found its king. Upon your furrowed brow, the mathematics of our existence, the geometry of the cosmos. An ephemeral equation wholly expressed in negative space. To invoke its power was to refactor the most fundamental underpinnings of our fragile dimension. To imprint one's mind upon reality itself. The wind blew sour. The oceans roiled. The earth shuddered at the coming change. What world could be born of a mind so sharpened by appetence? Mankind became a mockery. His newly horrid outlines a twisted tribute to the shape of your flaws. Newborn horrors, spawn of the crown, imprinted with your insatiable, reaching hunger. Our world convulses, stretched and torn by the emptiness that surrounds it. This existential dissolution is born of you, and only you can do what must be done to stop it. Here, at the nexus of ruin, loathing poured forth from the darkest recesses of your mind. Your failures took form, and the world bowed in honor of your great wretchedness. The stain of your bankruptcy frayed the very fabric of our dimension. But you were afraid to face what you had wrought and fled down the long road of your memories, hiding yourself away. I remember our first meeting on the steps of the university. You were golden, lit from within by the glow of potential. Finally, my friend, I would see that potential realized. It is time to reclaim the world from your weakness. Meet your derelictions with blazing defiance. The equation must be balanced. Gaze now upon your great achievement, the sum total of your failings, your body of work. A solitary life, a sudden death. Who knows what this one leaves behind? Death comes for the rich and poor alike. She fades into the shadows for the last time. She sought a glorious end and found it. A warrior's death, redemptive and transcendent. Every road must end. Not all who seek redemption will find it. The final chord is struck. The minstrel takes his final bow. Go with grace into the great beyond. He was mourned years ago. Now he is simply gone. At last, the battlefield has claimed its due. Another old soldier lays down his life in the dirt of a distant land. He will drift among the stars. He courted the unthinkable, but to no avail. Nothing can survive such a wholesale, organic failure. She understood death, but could not defy it. Extinguished, she can run no further. Snuffed out before her time. Pray her convictions lent some small comfort in her final moments. Despite being in perfect working order, it remains damnably stuck just before 12. An early experiment. Gird yourself and don't stand too close. We found the pathetic creature chained to an obelisk, a half-mile beneath the old church ruins. The theory at the time was that harm could be rendered to a subject by proxy. The well-worn seat of our research, still littered with notes, diagrams, and dusty journals. I regret ever buying that cursed clay from which sprung this anathema. Recovered from the sunken temple off the wind-whipped coast, it emanates an antediluvian power.
we were able to replicate the dark song, albeit in a more conventional key. It would be unwise to open this hateful portal, if memory serves. You painted without rest for days, babbling incoherently about distant, half-imagined places. The inscription reads, "The sacrifice of hope opens the gate to ruin. Offer of yourself if you crave the void." We reasoned that the mind must be dissected if it is to be understood. A rare and impressive collection of folklore, ancient wisdom, and sinister secrets.
A handsome rendering of that devilish degenerate who so eagerly welcomed us to his table.
There is something unearthly in the tannin of this unsavory vintage. The tools of violence, despicable and dangerous. A regrettably necessary acquisition. A bit of comfort on the road to damnation. Something to ease the rigors of the road. A sound investment in roads yet untraveled. Anything that lets us travel further is worth the cost. Trinkets and baubles paid for in blood. Such power in such a little thing. The odds of illness are high. Best to be prepared. Tonics, tinctures, and remedies. The science of hope. The treatment is harsh, but undeniably effective. We can suffer no sickness on this pilgrimage. We must preserve what is best in us. Strength comes in many forms. Even the worst habits can be overcome. We need not be defined by our shortcomings.
A glint in the shadows. The hunter is here. There, above the hearth, the hunter's mark. The hunter waits, brooding beneath his cowl. There is no man behind the hunter's mask, only a terrible thought. Every league, a lesson. Learn a little, and begin again. Will you press on into uncertainty, or claim what you can? Sometimes it is wiser to try anew, fortified by trials past. Shall we continue, or is the lesson too demanding? He has no past, no future, no mercy. He will lend you his wicked talents. For a price. The thrill of the hunt. The promise of payment. The contract is sealed with a silent nod. Courage glows golden within you once again. Gather what hope you have found and begin your journey anew. Your redemption begins now. Only death for those who would seek to stifle us.
Good. A an improvement. This will serve well. Any advantage is a good thing. Bolt it on and be off. The mountain will not be denied. Experimentation. Your academic instincts serve you well. Reconfigure. Meet each challenge on its own terms. A little company for the long ride ahead. It cannot fight, but perhaps it can calm.
Radiant light will suffuse you with the strength of your convictions.
Unmapped, unexplored, a risky proposition. Abandoned waterways, home now to far worse than rats. Our great cities burn, all that beauty and knowledge, ash on the wind. Another nameless city, another inferno of mutilation and madness. The barnacled timbers of the coastal villages are sodden with salt and secrets. The shrouded coast, isolated and drowning in amphibious degeneracy. The tainted crop continues to spread its tendrils of rot and pestilence. The farms and fields of our kingdom, overrun with putrescence and rot. Mud and rain, resignation and death. This land is truly barren. Trenches and tents, the front lines of a war that was never fought.
The mountain waits, casting its shadow over all the land. The warmth of better days gone now, entombed in ice. Refracted, distorted, these glacial walls reflect the twisted heart of their maker. Frigid wind wails through desolate canyons, a eulogy to the sane world. The climb is treacherous, the air thin, but you will endure it. No further shelter awaits. This is the very summit of cruelty.
The first of many forks in the road. Choose your path and ride out unbowed. Everywhere in ruin, everywhere in need. The provinces and cantrevs of our land, crumbling and undone. Every road a winding torment, every turn bent on our destruction. Rain, fire, and rot. Is there no sanctuary from this madness? Consider your position and plan accordingly.
There is nothing for it now but to press on, come what may.
The inevitable end of your journey awaits you, once again.
All roads lead to the mountain, but only one leads beyond it.
Conventional fare, but fairly priced. Precious relics remind us of a time before the end. Spend what you can, or wealth no longer has meaning. If indeed it ever did. Learn what can be taught, that you may stand just a little taller at the end. Listen, practice, improve. One learns quickly when survival demands it. Rest tonight, under the mountain's unblinking gaze. The fire is lit, the table is set. The inn awaits its favorite guests. There are yet places such as this, where a little light still gathers. Rest now for a time. The roaring heart does much for the weary body, even more perhaps for the restless soul. Lower your guard, soften your gaze. It is safe here. We would come here in summers of years gone to write, think, and rest. The place is a little worse for wear, but familiar nonetheless. The familiar hearth crackles invitingly once again. An accomplishment worth remembering. Let them know us by our reputation. Your coach must be maintained if it is to carry you where you must go. Each improvement, a new variable in the equation of your fate. Planning and mindfulness, as vital to survival as sharpened steel. The next stop is leagues away. Plan accordingly. In this world, wealth is worthless without purpose. Scavenge what you can, and be off once more. An impressive haul. Put it to good use. The means of mastery. Experience, however painful, is the greatest teacher of all. By confronting the past, we learn to face the future. Your coach is laden. You can carry no more. A fortune in memories, long forgotten. The Wainwright awaits, eager to ply his trade. An inkling of potency still lingers in some of these well-worn relics. Amidst the spoils, an artifact of unparalleled power. Let us hope their desperation can be eased. Facing oblivion, these folk have kept their honor. Have you? You must be strong enough to shoulder more than your share of the burden. Desperate and wanting, will you rebuff their earnest pleas? Look upon their noble struggle and be humbled by it. Giving in to madness is easier than holding out against it. They are heroes. Perhaps I left this for you. Perhaps you left it for yourself. Perhaps it is not here at all. My wealth and possessions, bundled into this meager pile. Take up these goods and imbue them with purpose. Karma abhors waste. Best to take all you can. An academic's study, full of the forbidden and the forgotten. Rummage through the shelves, laden with echoes of indistinct ideas. This unkempt study evokes a feeling of the familiar, does it not? A place of research and inquiry. A monument to a once prestigious career.
Sharpen your blades, that we may properly excise our portion.
Emptiness and dissolution have wormed their way into the world. Behold, the infinite emptiness of the void. Reality comes asunder before our eyes. The beautiful illusion that was the world, fragmented and undone. The library burns, and with it the remains of philosophy, reason, and insight. The conflagration must be stopped. The librarian must be destroyed.
He teeters madly upon his ladder, reveling in the fiery destruction of human accomplishment.
The Church of the Change, an inglorious heap of rotting timbers. They must be made to see that their monstrous god is mortal. The landowner's manor. Do you hear the child's cries? The harvest is here. Pity those with a place at the table.
Born to a corpulent, half-eaten mother, the child is a ravenous avatar of degeneracy.
Within every keep, a general and his loyal, lumbering guard. He has retreated, undying, into a dream, and there he must stay.
Locked in a nightmare slumber, he is tortured by failures both real and imagined.
This is a den of absolute evil and wretchedness. Prepare yourself. Foul winds and foul tidings. No doubt the source is within. Beware what awaits you inside. Steel yourself. The hulking horror inside will not fall easily. Who will face the half-remembered horrors of their past? We must understand the past if we are ever to be free of it. His stifled smirking betrays a malign madness. He struggles to decide what is real, holding back fits of laughter and tears. He chatters incoherently, but his prices remain fixed. His attention is unfocused, as though he is in two places at once. Joints ache and muscles burn. The body requires attention. She weeps for the fallen, and knows she will join them soon enough. She understands the futility of her work, but undertakes it nonetheless. She heals the injuries of others, while ignoring her own. A sanctum of tranquility awaits. Swine folk, indulging their vileness in the dark. No choice. The brutish creatures must be confronted. Lament the knowledge taken by the fires of these fanatics. Emboldened anarchists, desperate to exercise their nihilism. These slovenly creatures worship the sea. Let us return them to it. The guttural prayers of the fisherfolk must be silenced. Plague eaters, feeding on the tainted crop. Toothy and corpulent, slaves to their hunger. Slow, vacant, and resigned. The lost battalion shambles on. They had honor once. Now they have nothing at all. They revel in debauchery, debasing themselves in the face of the end. Your path lies through them, and so they must fall. Pity a soul so twisted by despair. To arms, though it brings no satisfaction. The value of such a view is matched only by its unsettling awfulness. Everywhere, in all directions, destruction has claimed dominion. Look to the horizon and lament. The fog is parted. Our way is made clear. This is no place for decent folk. Lost and desperate, they need your help. Let us temper this world's cruelty, just a little.
The flame sputters. You must give hope to get it.
Supplies this way, if you can make it. Up ahead, the seat of our regrettable research.
Ahead, a bestial refuge, littered with bones and less identifiable remains.
The avatars of oblivion, clergy of the spreading stain. I trust you have calculated your odds carefully. This will not be easy. Look ahead, a place to reflect, remember, and reconcile. Let us hope the madman's scrounging has borne fruit. If you hope to heal, you have chosen wisely. At last, respite within reach.
The hearth calls out to the weary. Haggard, tired-eyed, all are welcome here. These warm candlelit windows promise refuge. A fortifying meal, a strong drink, and finally, rest. A refreshing commune unburdens the mind.
Perhaps you are finding your courage at last. Chaos must be met with unwavering resolve. You will fight, so that others may flee. Reliable information brings accurate insight, after all.
Zealotry, an undying blight upon the soul. Avarice slips unseen into the catacombs of the mind. Beneath bloodlust and fury, there is emptiness and shame. Hunted, harried, a fugitive seeking to outpace the past. A murderous melody lingers long after the final chord has been struck. Making peace with adversity is the very essence of existence. Pride, more devastating than the horrors of 100 campaigns. To know the abyss, one must embrace it. Indiscriminate science stains the surgeon's hands. Nothing remains save a burning will to survive. A sister of battle, repudiated but unbowed. It is a difficult thing to to face the past, and even more so, to reconcile with it. Acceptance requires honesty, painful as it might be. Only when we acknowledge the past can we be free from it. Flagellant, Chapter 1. Baptism. He was a listless shade of the city, indifferent to his penury. With his skeletal build and bleeding gums, he looked an easy target for a pair of drunks seeking an outlet for their frustrations. The blows rained down, a tooth cracked, and a feverish crimson eclipsed his vision. In pain, there was power. He rose above his panting assailants and, reveling in the marks of their sin, forgave them their trespasses. Chapter 2. In Service of the Divine. Drawn to the somber depths of the Church's oubliettes, he pledged his life to the clergy. There he inflicted death by slow, delicious degrees, each crack of the lash an honor, a gift, a morbid sacrament. But his zeal proved too ardent, his brethren too timid. They cast him out, rendered him once more onto the streets. Chapter 3. More. He roved out in search of torment, consuming the sin of any who would purge their misdeeds upon his body. Each wound fueled his fervor, a rapture only found in baptism by the lash. Drunk on his bloody intinctions, manic with the need for some elusive apotheosis, he gouged at himself without mercy. As blood poured from his rended flesh, his consciousness faltered, and the thundering hoofbeats of death rang violent in his ears. Chapter 4. Death's Door. Her scythe promised numbing obliviation, a premature end to his sacred journey of sensation. Gleaned from the world's gruesome delights, his power was enough to defy death herself. Chapter 5. Behold the Man. Once more he wandered, ravenous for fresh suffering and delighting in its novelty and excess. Offering himself to blade and talon alike, he became an icon writ in flesh, a living prayer to whatever gods would turn an ear. Undying, he savored his delicious declension, an eternity of pain and wrath, heaven on earth. Grave Robber. Chapter 1. Luxury's Lap. Born into money and married into more, she spent her days on horseback and her evenings in the ballroom. She was the object of her husband's boorish lust and drunken temper, placating his worst tendencies with a veneer of gracious deference, all the while indulging murderous fantasies of freedom and the fortune that would soon be hers. Chapter 2. Nightcap. Night after night of disrespect and abuse, enough was enough. She listened, smirking, as his empty apologies came in desperate, choking gags. Chapter 3. Embarrassment of riches. Years of decadence and financial mismanagement had left the estate in staggering debt.
Humiliated and facing eviction, she wandered the empty halls, hurling inebriated indignities at the portrait of the deceased, whose hand had rested so possessively upon her shoulder. A gleam of gold on that painted paw reminded her that his rings were unaccounted for, and must have been buried with him. Chapter 4. Filthy Rich. To preserve her social standing, she would pilfer the rings from his fingers, the gold from his teeth. She was awash in exhilaration, the glint in her eyes outshining the fistful of ill-gotten gains. Chapter 5. The After Party. Armed officials dispatched to oversee the eviction were shocked to find the front doors listlessly ajar. The lavish carpets were lousy with dirt and leaves. A heap of heirlooms gleamed on the ballroom floor, rings and brooches in a careless pile. The lady of the manor, however, was nowhere to be found. Hellion. Chapter 1. The Eve of Glory. She was young to join the war band, but any who challenged her readiness were met with clenched fists and violent indignation. Having bloodied the last of her detractors, the matter was considered finally settled. On the eve of battle, she joined her clanmates in a raucous celebration, her stein and her spirits overflowing with abundance. Her entire life spent in preparation, but when it mattered most, she had failed. Chapter 2. The Brave. She was the tip of the spear, poised to sunder the enemy line, to live forever in the songs of her people. Chapter 3. Night in the Woods. As the advancing army moved on, she huddled tightly in the tree's clammy roots, hoping to be somehow swallowed up into the earth. At dawn, she woke tormented by the exuberant cries of carrion crows, come to feast upon the corpses of her kin. When at last she stirred, the scavengers took flight, repulsed by the sight of this undeserving revenant. Chapter 4. Shame and Exile. She had shunned a warrior's death, and her cowardice would be impugned. They cast her out, an exile, unwelcome and unsung. Chapter 5. The Great Emptiness. Alone and untethered, she wandered the countryside, fighting for sport and soaking her wounds in wine. She sought death at every turn, desperate for a second chance to prove her mettle. But it seemed even that terrible wraith had forsaken her. Her isolation was absolute, her shame barely concealed by a fragile facade of fearlessness. Highwayman. Chapter 1. Freedom. A prison riot. A fleeting chance to escape incarceration. He would be a fugitive, a hunted man, but a free one nonetheless. Chapter 2. Laying Low. Harried by a pursuing garrison, he took refuge in the fetid canals of the city. Concealment took its toll, and soon he began to see himself in the furtive, scurrying pests that formed an unfortunate portion of his meager diet. Freedom, once so fondly imagined, had become a vortex of degradation. Chapter 3. One Last Job. He was sick and starving, and in desperation offered his expertise to an unscrupulous malefactor. Shackled once more to an unsavory task by an advance of gold, he lined his belly, girded himself, and prepared for one final heist. Chapter 4. Highway Robbery. The stagecoach arrived, and he set himself to the business of bloodshed and robbery. He fulfilled his obligations with exceptional lethality, but his grim satisfaction would prove short-lived. Chapter 5. Shackled. The lifeless bodies of a woman and child, horribly mutilated by errant gunfire, stared spectrally through the remnants of the coach door. Arrested by the ghoulish sight, he felt the cold chains of remorse tighten around his heart. Guilt was a pursuer he could never outrun, a prison he would never escape. Jester. Chapter 1. Some strange melody. He was a layabout without aspiration or purpose, content to loiter on street corners, languidly busking for passers-by. Roughly ushered from the bustling commercial blocks, he wandered the forgotten corners of the city. An intoxicating melody drifted over a nearby cemetery wall, and he stumbled deliriously amongst the tombstones in search of the performer. Chapter 2. Music of the Night. He could learn this unearthly hymn and claim it as his own. Ambition, so long dormant within him, had been roused. He delighted in fantasies of fame, renown, and respect. Chapter 3. Play to the crowd. When word of his uncommon talent reached the palace, he was summoned to entertain king and court. Anticipating an historic performance and enthused adulation, he was stunned to find himself instead the object of their debased ridicule. While his noble audience dined drunkenly, he was mocked, tortured, and subjected to an obscene array of dangerous and decadent humiliations. Chapter 4. A Dark Song. He unleashed his resentment upon instrument and crowd, playing the demoniac melody with unrestrained fury. This was the song of the dead, and it had exacted a fitting tribute. Chapter 5. Finale. Bowing low, he basked in the echoing applause of dripping blood. The scene of wholesale dismemberment drove him to fits of mirthless hysterics. He was laughing still as he placed the blade against his own hand, severing his connection to whatever twisted talent he had so fleetingly enjoyed. Aimlessly he drifted from the hall, humming broken bars of a discordant melody he could not quite remember. Leper. Chapter 1. Shun them not. Despite the protestations of his royal advisors, he would visit with the sick and dying, providing them what comfort he could. The ailing and infirm were far less repulsive to him than the venomous whispers of his scoffing entourage. Chapter 2. Infection. Early signs could be ignored or concealed, but soon the reality was inescapable, whether by some affliction of lineage or by direct transmission. symptoms of incurable disease began to openly manifest themselves. Racked with pain, he summoned doctors and aides from the farthest reaches of his lands, all of whom concluded the worst. The king was dying. Chapter 3. Treason. Sedition, like any illness, spreads slowly. Rotten with a cynical opportunism born of long-standing entitlement, the scheming circle of advisors drafted mutinous plans. Though bedridden, he had long since divined their intent and feared the disastrous results of their would-be rule. Summoning his blacksmith and his strength, he hoisted his blade and rose to meet the coming threat. Chapter 4. The Purge. He had shown his compassion. Now he would show his fury. His blade had broken, but so too the treasonous plot. Chapter 5. A beautiful view. Satisfied that the spirit of his benevolent tenure would endure, he abdicated the throne. People gathered at windows and along the roads, weeping, some threw petals at his feet, while others watched in reverent stoicism. As he walked beyond the city gates, he marveled at the beauty of the world and was grateful for his many blessings. Man-at-Arms. Chapter 1. A premature promotion. The politics of a military career are perhaps as treacherous as war itself. Though untested in combat, his acumen for advancement was unmatched. Through a dubious campaign of influence and intimidation, he had at last claimed a coveted command, and was eager to bask in the glory of the victories that were sure to come. Chapter 2. A Leader of Men. Behold the conquering general, marching his men to victory. A rout, a massacre, a complete and total failure of command. Chapter 3. One Eye Open. Every night, the men of his regiment would interrupt his fitful convalescence. Mutilated and maimed, the spectral garrison clawed at his bed covers, whispering hateful truths in his ears. The exhausted attendants in the field hospital would wake to the sound of panicked screaming and inglorious sobs. It was not the war that had taken his eye. It was pride. Chapter 4. Ghosts of the Past. Demoted and disgraced, he returned to the battlefield, ready to endure the wrath of his regiment and grant them some small peace. At last, he would sleep undisturbed, and perhaps find some comfort in that murky abyss of dreamless wonder. Chapter 5. In the Trenches. He resolved to spend his remaining years seeking atonement in the trenches of bloody battlefields the world over. For him, there could be no respite from the horrors of war, and when at last he was struck down, he would die alone and unremembered. Surely, he deserved no better. Occultist. Chapter 1. The Ritual. On certain portentous evenings carefully selected for their astrological potency, he would gather his devotees around the ancient onyx table, and joining hands with them, would send his spirit out into the void. safely tethered by their vital energies, he was free to wander the outer spheres in search of some dark communion and impossible power. Chapter 2: A Door in the Desert. He found himself in a vast expanse of windswept dunes. Ahead, the stone spires of a pyramidal temple called down jagged bolts from a rolling, angry sky. Undaunted, he crossed the threshold of the towering aperture, settled himself upon the central dais, and prepared for the coming sacrifice. Chapter 3: Some parts must die. Terrible though it was, he would pay the price for power. The emptiness in him called out across boundless gulfs of unknown space, for nature abhors a vacuum. Chapter 4: The Guest. Drawing vitality from the assembled mediums, he would hold fast against the thing and harness a portion of its power. Imbued with strange currents of infernal origin, his apotheosis was complete. Chapter 5: An Eternal Flame. Emerging from his trance, he met the charred, steaming corpses of his acolytes with a shudder. He could sense the eldritch entity stalking the edges of his consciousness, probing for weaknesses. He had become a beacon, a conduit to unknown regions, and would be assailed by those blasphemous forces all the rest of his days. Plague Doctor. Chapter 1: The Good Student. Brilliant and bold, her unconventional theories created nothing short of a scandal in her 4th year. The mocking whispers and scornful glares of her peers and professors had an ironically invigorating effect upon her extracurricular experiments. The mysteries of the human body, of life and death itself, hovered just beyond her scalpel's reach. If only she could acquire a corpse of sufficient freshness. Chapter 2: Head of the Class. Her professor was a relic, hacking and wheezing his way through a hopelessly conventional curriculum. She delighted in the combative debate, and behind her bookish glasses, reveled in their outrage and confusion. Chapter 3: Extra Credit. By the 2nd semester, her research was at a critical point, and regular supply raids of the university laboratories had become necessary. During one such expedition, she stumbled upon her professor, awkwardly slumped over his podium, a bloody kerchief on the floor. Here, then, was her ideal cadaver, her long-awaited opportunity, and she would not waste it. Chapter 4: Failing Grade. Success. Vindication. The human machine restored to action. The shrieking and wailing was horrible, but the silence that followed was even worse. Chapter 5: Do No Harm. Disposal of the body was a procedural affair. A carboy of acid would dissolve the thing and no evidence would remain. In the weeks that followed, however, she found herself unable to focus, sitting motionless at her desk, paralyzed by the ceaseless wailing that reverberated in her mind.
Runaway. Chapter 1. The Pigs of St. Martha's. Her pious caretakers had marked her for the last time. Tonight, she would escape their cruelty at last. She ran blindly into the rain, the squeals of the pursuing sisters lost in the howling wind. Chapter 2. Beloved. Good fortune is a rare and wondrous thing. She straggled from place to place, drenched and hungry, until a kindly woodsman and his wife happened upon her. Childless themselves, they welcomed her into their home, where she warmed herself in the glow of their hearth and hearts. Chapter 3. Drawn to the flame. She would stay up long into the night, tending the fire. Captivated by its shifting hues, she thrilled to the eerie dance of spark and ember, running her fingers absent-mindedly over the scars that patterned her arm. The hearthlight seemed somehow alive, and in these private moments, she yearned to reach out and be touched once again by its searing embrace. Chapter 4. Burnt Offering. An accident, but surely there was time to contain the flames. The walls were alight. There was no stopping it now. Chapter 5. Ashes. She stood in the center of the inferno, transfixed by its swirling kaleidoscopic beauty. Her rapturous fixation was cut short by a heavy beam falling from the ceiling, blocking the door. Panicked, she dove headlong through a window as the cabin bloomed into a pyre. Heaped upon the wet grass, she heard the screams of her adoptive parents, trapped and burning in their bedroom. Vestal. Chapter 1. Want not. Together with her sisters, she tended the Order's sacred flame in pious humility. The Abbey's austere arches and sanctified masonry afforded her a life of sheltered privilege that few beyond the walls could imagine. Discipline was paramount, and when forbidden desires would seek to distract her from monastic toil, she smothered them. Reluctantly. Chapter 2. A momentary lapse. She was a paragon of duty and virtue, but reminders of her deprivation were everywhere. Surely she deserved some indulgence for her labors. Immersed in her reverie, she started violently at the piercing admonitions of the furious abbot. Chapter 3. No God but Men. Her terrified wails rang off the transepts as the abbot dragged her to the oubliette. As a deterrent to the congregation, her punishment would be more than commensurate with her blasphemy. Locked interminably in the festering dark, she awaited retribution from the divine, while suffering the mortal tortures of its enraged servants. Chapter 4. Divine Intervention. Vindication. A golden ray beamed affirmation into the stagnant blackness of the dungeon. No divine punishment awaited her. It was her captors who had strayed from the light. Radiant with revelation, she stormed the stairs to the cloisters. Chapter 5. Wrath. Eager to share her emancipation with her convent, she rushed headlong toward the dormitory. But where the chamber door once stood, she was met instead by a sheer wall of fresh masonry. Her cries of jubilation died in her throat. From behind the drying mortar and sturdy stone, there came a feeble scratching. Then her sister's last hideous gasps. The price of her wantonness would not be measured solely in blows from the flail.